Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities presents Hometown Haunts, the podcast. This is episode 17, where we're talking about the Moselle and the ghost ship of Petersburg. But for right now, we have social media. You can follow us at Cin Cabinet Curio on Twitter, Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and you can always email us your ghost stories and urban legends at cincycuriosities@gmail.com. If you didn't know, we're an official podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can find us on iTunes at Cincinnati Cabinet of Curiosities. Please rate and review us there and on YouTube so other spooky lovers like you can find us. There's links in our show notes. And this week, Christina, you have a weird thing you saw this week. And you're muted.
Yes, yes, I didn't mean to be muted. Yeah, I thought that this was an article in the Guardian, and I thought it was interesting because they said as birth rates fall, there's a lot of ghost towns. Now, it's not just birth rates in the U.S. This kind of is talking more about Europe, but I know in the U.S. you have so many towns because of industry changing and stuff like that are almost ghost towns. Like, very little activity happening anymore, and it kind of made me think of the movies like the Monkeys movie where you see all the animals going through New York, New York
Planet
City.
of the Apes?
No, not that one. The Terry Gilliam movie that they did a TV show. What?
Planet of the Apes? I thought you were talking about the band The Monkeys for a second there, and I'm like,
no.
I don't remember that.
No, the Terry Gilliam movie that starred Bruce Willis.
12 Monkeys.
12 Monkeys, that's right.
With
12 Monkeys.
Brad Pitt's
I was getting
too.
the number mixed up with 28 Days Later. 12 Monkeys. Remember how it showed when there were no people living in there were animals and stuff, and that's actually happening to these cities that are no longer populated, as they're having all this resurgence in lynx and wolves and stuff like that. And it's kind of interesting how and actually even in the pandemic, air quality is getting better and stuff like that because people aren't going anywhere and causing the damage that they cause. So I thought that was kind of an interesting story. But when I read
that where the meme where everyone's home for the pandemic and the earth is healing came from, and it shows
Probably.
like all sorts of fun juxtaposed things.
Yeah, and it's been a popular trope in movies, like where you see lions wandering through New York City when there's no people left, and wolves, and that kind of thing. And this article made me think about it. I mean, they were attributing it to birth rates falling as well, abandoned ghost villages. But in the United States, a lot of it is the reshaping of people leaving small towns because the industry that was there left. In Indiana, that's happened a lot. You've had whole cities that disappeared because of losing, the steel industry, like in Ohio, is what made a lot of areas of Ohio abandoned, and the car industry changing.
That's what happened to my parents' hometown. It's a shell of its former self.
What was its industry?
It was a harbor town on Lake Erie, and they would actually load barges full of coal from Pittsburgh. So when the coal industry, of course, is dying off, and the steel industry has been dying off, so that has shrunk. So there aren't as many seafaring boats visiting the harbor and loading everything. So yeah, that it's been shrinking for 50 years now.
And that's the sort of incubator for many urban legends and stuff, is seeing ghost towns and places where people used to be, that people start coming up with fan fiction about what's there or what happened. So that's always exciting. But that's the weird thing for this week.
Yeah,
I love ghost towns. They're so cool.
Yeah,
well, they're fun to take photos of.
It's so great you got pictures of that Kenner factory before they tore it down. That went down so fast.
I really wanted to go inside, but one, I didn't want to get arrested, and two, I didn't want to fall and hurt myself because I'm accident prone.
Yeah, Those places
Yeah.
are super dangerous when they're abandoned for that long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that also reminds me, didn't that happen at Chernobyl with the dogs?
Mm-hmm. It also
And they
happened at
were
Fukushima.
and they were irradiated?
Yes.
Poor babies.
Yeah. So pretty short life expectancy there, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happened around Fukushima in Miyagi Prefectures up in Japan. And heck, it happened here in Cincinnati with the
Fernald.
pandemic. During the peak of it in like March and April, we had a pack of coyotes running
Really?
around, and it would be getting people have security camera footage of the coyotes running around the streets, like picking off mostly like ground squirrels, raccoons,
Mhm.
occasionally getting somebody's cat or a Yorkie, small dogs that weren't
No.
supervised outside. So,
Yeah, there's actually the feral cat population in Mount Airy forest has been severely curtailed by coyotes. Like people that used
I
to
could
feed
see
the
that.
feral cats, there's not that many anymore.
Oof.
Aw.
That's one reason we don't let our cat. Plus, living on a busy road, but that's one reason we would never let our cats outside is because
Hmm.
they'd be lunch.
Mhm.
There's not even
Our
as
dogs
many.
are the size of coyotes, so I
Yeah,
don't know
they
what would
probably
happen.
wouldn't have to worry about them, but as a matter of fact, we don't even see that many raccoons around anymore in our area of town, and I think it's because predators.
Yeah. We used to have great horned owls that lived in the trees across the street. I loved them at night, but they got chased out by a uh, type of falcon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I can't remember the type it is. My bird watching friend looked at it and went, "Oh, that's a blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Oh, cool. I'm not going to remember that." And indeed, I did not.
Well, telling stories like this, like I think you had mentioned when we were talking about it, is we can hardly wait to go out and start doing some legend tripping and going to areas and filming, and hopefully that will be possible in the
Yeah,
next months.
I miss that legend tripping and just going and visiting spooky places around. It's just really hard to get motivated. Today was terrible. Cincinnati right now, it's sleeting out and it's below freezing and just gross. It's not even snowing. It's just sleet everywhere, freezing on everything. It's not safe to drive around right now.
Yeah,
So
yeah, because the ice sometimes makes power lines come down too, so that makes it very perilous.
that and trees.
Yes.
If it's
So,
my toddler, he went face down too.
oh, is he okay?
He's fine. He was just startled. And I'm like, yes, son, this is Mother Nature happening. But yeah, it's no fun for anyone.
Yeah. So
Concrete
anyway,
meat face.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he was
Concrete
just
meat
shocked.
face. Yeah.
Yeah.
Poor baby.
All right. So now I guess on to the main topic, which is a really
Yes.
exciting one.
This is a fun one. I learned about these two boats in different times. The ghost ship of the Ohio River I learned about from two friends who are big kayakers. And then the Moselle, I, of course, learned from our friend Brandon Wagner. And feel free to chip in with any questions if you have them, ladies. But tonight's topic is the ghost ships of the Ohio River. And our show is all about ghost ships of the Ohio River. The 1838 explosion of the steamship Moselle and the abandoned ghost ship of the USS Sachem or Sachem. I am not sure how this is pronounced. I'm going to probably call it the Sachem. There is some graphic detail described with the Moselle incident, so listener discretion is advised. And we do have some of the the illustrations from the Cincinnati Enquirer. I believe it was called the Cincinnati Whig back in 1838 newspaper. And we will have some safe times in the show notes for you to skip to if you want to just avoid some graphic detail. It's not a lot. It's not as bad as other episodes. So, like I said, for tonight's show, we're talking about the ghost ships of the Ohio. And we sourced information from the Cincinnati Enquirer, the Cincinnati Whig newspaper, the Ohio History Central, gendisasters.com, Atlas Obscura, roadtrippers.com, Wikipedia, Cincinnati Refined Magazine, Kentucky Living Magazine, and steamboats.org. All the links will be in our show notes.
By the
I
way,
love
it's
steamboats.
pronounced Sachem.
Sachem. Thank you. That helps a lot. So Sachem. Okay. So we're going to start with the Moselle, actually. So we're actually touching on a topic we quickly talked about in episode 3 with our friend Brandon Wagner. And Brandon wrote about the music hall horrors for our comics anthology, Cincinnati Cabinets of Curiosities, issue number 1. And part of the beginning of the horrific ghost stories of the Cincinnati Music Hall actually stem from the Moselle Steamboat disaster of 1838. So if you would like to listen to what happened to the rest of the story, go check out episode 3. So this is episode 17. We're doing some timey-wimey stuff, but it will be fun. We're going to just dive deeper into the steamboat legacy of Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati was a major stop on the Ohio River during the heyday of steamboats. We love steamboats in this city. You can take steamboat tours to this day, though they're kind of fitted to be modernized. We have the USS Nightmare, which is a floating haunted house attraction that's open every October, which is a steamboat. And also the Cincinnati Reds baseball team, the baseball field along the Ohio River is made to look like a steamboat complete with the little stacks. So we really love them in this city. It's a recurring motif that you'll find if you have keen eyes. There was numerous factories in the city for processing lumber, pigs, and booze. We made a lot of whiskey in this area. Is this episode 18? Okay. Ha! Oh, well, we'll just keep going. I couldn't find a 17. Anyway, I'll get back to what I was talking about. So, yeah, we have a lot of whiskey made in this area. And Cincinnati also had a really robust passenger steamboat building market as well. So, for example, we have the Fulton shipyards, which were located east of downtown across from Brooklyn, Kentucky. And they started working on the Moselle on December 1st, 1837, and they completed it on March 31st, 1838. This is important because the Moselle steamboat was only about a month old when it had a catastrophe on the Ohio River in front of Cincinnati. At the time, the Moselle was the peak of Western boat making and was the fastest and most lavish steamboat ever built. People would line up along the riverbank to watch it steam by because it was breaking records with its I want to say float times, but no, that's not right. With its times going between Cincinnati and different points of interest along the Ohio River. So, for example, on its maiden voyage, she completed the run from Portsmouth, Ohio to Cincinnati, which is a 110-mile trip in 7 hours and 54 minutes, which doesn't sound really fast to us nowadays because you can get up to Chicago within that amount of time from Cincinnati, but it apparently took way longer. I couldn't get exact numbers, but that cut off the travel time by several hours. Another example would be Cincinnati to St. Louis, which was a major commuting destination between the two cities. We've always been competitive. Hi there, Jen. Who's from St. Louis. This was completed in 2 days and 16 hours. It's a 750-mile trip down the river, and this cut off several hours from the actual travel time for the river. So it was hailed as a wonderful advancement in steamboat and travel technology in America during that time. So, in the evening of April 25th, 1838, the Moselle steamboat was waiting at the Cincinnati public landing, which is now what's located on top of it now is the Taylor Southgate Bridge. And so, just so you know where in the river it was located, and it was waiting while families were boarding. The young owner and skipper of the boat, Captain Isaac Purin, kept all four boilers filled with steam while the passengers loaded onto the steamboat. This was so that he could show off not only the quickest takeoff time from the dock, but he was also trying to catch up with another steamboat that had left from Cincinnati's port on its way to St. Louis just a few minutes prior. And this was the steamboat, the Benjamin Franklin. So he was trying to catch up and overtake the Benjamin Franklin or the Ben Franklin steamer so that it can prove just how fast this mighty steamboat was. It was all bravado. So naturally curious, there was a bunch of spectators lined up along the riverbank to watch this boat leave. Keeping all four boilers full of steam, however, turned out to be very reckless. And as the Cincinnati Whig newspaper reported, and mind you, this is where we get a bit graphic, at the very moment her wheels made the first evolution, her boilers burst a most awful and astounding noise, equal to the most violent clap of thunder. The explosion was destructive and heartrending in the extreme. Heads, limbs, bodies, and blood were seen flying through the air in every direction, attended by the most horrid shrieks and groans from the wounded and the dying. So Captain Purin's mangled body flew from the boat onto the shoreline about 30 feet. Another poor soul who was in the front of the boat flew 100 feet into the air and went headfirst into somebody's roof and went through the house. That was not easy to clean up, I am sure. Those who weren't launched into the air by the catastrophic explosion tried to swim the 30 feet to shore. However, it was difficult with the amount of debris because it was a complete explosion, meaning the entire boat just disintegrated. And also, it started floating downriver, pulling the people who had escaped from the boat with it. So it made it about 100 yards downriver before sinking. So in total, the accident, the boat, went from being floating to exploding to sinking within 15 minutes. Out of the estimated official records of 250 people on board, 150 did perish. In some cases, entire families were eliminated that day. One account, and this is very sad, the accounts from the people that witnessed it. One account was from a young boy who managed to swim to shore to safety and watched his mother and sister struggle to break away from the wreckage, and they eventually drowned in front of him. According to witnesses, most of the survivors were located below deck or in the back of the Moselle at the time of the explosion, where most of the victims gathered above deck and at the front of the boat. And although it was reported there were 250 passengers officially, it is suspected that the boat was overloaded with between 280 and 300 passengers, many of which had not registered their names on the manifest. So we actually don't have an accurate death count or survivor count because we don't know how many people were honestly on the boat that day. Thousands of people in Cincinnati, however, heard the explosion and ran to the riverbank to provide aid or gawk at the entire situation. Humans be human. The scene was horrific. About 20 to 30 severely injured people were pulled from the river. The survivors who had made it to shore were looking for their family members. These are excerpts taken from Lloyd's Steamboat directly. Wow. Let me try that sentence again. These are excerpts taken from Lloyd's Steamboat Directory and Disasters on the Western Waters, Cincinnati, Ohio, James T. Lloyd and Company, 1856. These are pages 89 through 93. Fathers were distractedly inquiring for children, children for parents, husbands for wives, and wives for each other. One man had saved a son, but lost a wife and 5 children. A father, partially demented by grief, lay with a wounded child on one side, his dead daughter on the other, and his expiring wife at his feet. One gentleman sought his wife and children, who were as eagerly seeking him out in the same crowd. They met and were reunited. And another description reads, a touching display of maternal affection was evinced by a lady who, on being brought to the shore, clasped her hands and exclaimed, "Thank God I am safe," but instantly recollecting herself, she ejaculated in a that is what it says, ejaculated in a voice of piercing agony, "Where is my child?" The infant, which had also been saved, was brought to her, and she fainted at the sight of it. It was estimated that 81 were killed, 55 were missing, and 13 were badly injured. And if you are curious, you can actually Google and find on steamboats.org and many of the other sites I had just listed at the preface that the actual manifests of who died, who was injured, and who actually went missing. And they were from all over the Midwest. They weren't all from Cincinnati. There were a lot of people from Illinois and Indiana and Michigan and Wisconsin. So it wasn't just Cincinnatians who died that day. However, the Moselle tragedy would not be in vain. And this is where it's very, very interesting. The incident prompted national mourning, and it was reported all over, not just the United States, but it also made to continental Britain or continental Europe as well. And the Congress passed the 1838 Act, which required inspections of steamboat boilers to ensure the safety of the passengers and the crew. This was the first federal regulation on private industry enacted for safety reasons and paved the way for consumer protection laws in the United States. And following up, and we have more about this in episode 3, what happened to the bodies that rained upon Cincinnati? They were collected by Cincinnati residents and buried in a potter's field located at 12th and Elm Streets across from the Episcopal and Presbyterian burial grounds, and what we know today as the Cincinnati Music Hall and Washington Park. So if you take your dog to Washington Park's dog park, you are in fact treading on the old Episcopal and Presbyterian burial grounds. So a lot of these ghosts are the first ones reported being witnessed around the Over the Rhine neighborhood. Now, when Music Hall was built, as well as Washington Park, these bones were all excavated and reburied at Spring Grove Cemetery, and they have a large... They don't call it a potter's field there, but that's where they're at now. So that is the story of the Moselle steam explosion of 1838. Thoughts? Comments?
That's
Stupid
nuts.
Isn't that always the thing? People in business are trying to get rid of regulations. I mean, it's really wonderful that they actually did something legislatively to stop this from happening again. You know, wouldn't that be nice if that happened with other things?
Yeah. So what I didn't note in that official or the original outline is that the Cincinnati mayor, the day after the accident, made it a regulation in Cincinnati for all the steamboats to be inspected before taking off to prevent this from happening again. And also, I think something about the manifests, but I can't speak to that. But definitely inspections on steamboats and their boilers before passengers can set foot. So they were really proactive, and Congress just took a few months later to get it enacted because it went nationwide. Steamboats were all over the Ohio River and Mississippi.
Well, yeah. It was the main mode of transportation for a while there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that one, I feel really bad. I have images in my head of everyone just being pulled out of the water right along. If you're in Cincinnati now, that area is actually where the ice rink arena is, and also the Reds Stadium along that riverbank. So right now it is just concreted in. and it's just a steep embankment of just concrete. But that used to be one of the Cincinnati ports, the public port. And that's where this disaster, everyone was pulled up onto that concrete area. So if you've run the Flying Pig, you have run over where this happened, because that's part of the marathon route, or any of the other marathon routes that go over using that, was it Taylor Southgate Bridge? You are literally running on top of where that happened.
How
Wow.
often were these steamboat disasters? Because it wasn't just Cincinnati. I mean, like I mentioned, when we did our music hall show, Kathy Weechman, who wrote Like a River, wrote about an explosion on the Missouri River that had as many deaths as the Titanic. I mean, it was
Yeah, so that was a Cincinnati Steamboat that also exploded then. And that was Union prisoners of war being brought back from Confederate prison camps that exploded and killed over 1,000 people. I don't remember the name of that one. There was also another notable Cincinnati Steamboat that exploded. And unfortunately, I didn't look too much into them because I was focused on both the is it not the Sachem? What sad?
I have it. I have it. It's let me listen again. Sachem.
Sachi.
Sachem.
Okay. Yeah, I was so focused on the Sachem and the Moselle, I didn't really take a whole lot of notes about other steamboats. But I know there's a bunch of maritime historians that have websites dedicated to it and go into even further detail. I went into as much detail as I thought our minds could handle on a Monday evening.
No, I think it's just interesting because that these did make them have more regulation. I mean, it's that's always the argument about regulation, because they say, oh well, if you regulate, that just hurts the businesses and people will self-regulate. But when clearly not only were they not self-regulating, he was like pushing it.
Yeah. And it had it been just himself, if he probably hadn't overloaded the boat, he probably would have had more speed, but he still turned on 4 boilers before taking off, which I don't know the nitty gritty of now how many boilers they had to have on, maybe only 2 out of the 4 before making it down the river. But it shocked everyone. It was like whenever we see those terrible airline disasters, like the Boeing ones that we just had a few years ago, that's the equivalency of it. And with the shock and just kind of disbelief that something so modern and supposed to be so progressive with helping transportation just exploded out of negligence on somebody's part. So,
well, on that oh, sorry, go on, Jen.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say it just goes to show you, or Jesus Christ, regulations. In my experience, people will take as much as they can. I know that's pessimistic of me, but if no one's telling them no, or you can't do that, either they're going to do it anyway or they won't.
Yeah, I was not surprised. No, it's fine.
No, it's true. It's true.
It's true. Like, just like the people that ran to the riverbank to see what was happening, they didn't offer any aid. They just were like, hey, look, people are slowly drowning. This is my entertainment for this week. That's, so.
Well, and that's the Titanic, if I'm not right, weren't they showing off how fast it could go, and that's why they hit the iceberg so hard? Like, they were trying to get there fast.
I think that was part of it.
Yeah, they're showing off how much power their boat that was unsinkable, and naming something unsinkable too is a bad plan, because you know that you're just threatening the fates.
Yeah,
when you make that sort of declaration.
Yeah, but Jen did find 3 of the illustrations from the Cincinnati Whig newspaper that show the Moselle before, during, and after the sinking. I'm not laughing out of haha, this is funny. I am laughing in this is disbelief, because they included the bodies flying out of the boat, but they're all just stick figures. It's not graphic at all. But
could you imagine just walking down the street, minding your own business, and all of a sudden you hear this noise and it's a dead body part just drops on your head or in front of you? Or the
so
one
that reminds me of a story.
that went through the house. Oh
I actually have a
God.
story. I have a story.
Oh, do tell.
So when I was in school, I watched an attempted suicide. So I was walking to my linguistics classes, and they were located next to one of the tallest buildings at Indiana University's campus. And this kid, I do not know him, he broke through one of the safety windows on the top floor with a chair, crawled out onto the window, and then dropped from about at least 7 stories. What saved him was the canopy that he went right into. So I watched this man drop 7 stories and into a rock-filled canopy, and the rocks actually cushioned his fall, so he survived. He broke both of his legs, but I remember watching this happen, and I just happened to look up to see what looked like I could see this chair fly out first, and I was just like, well, that's strange. Why is there? And then you see him go down, and you're like, oh no. And EMS, all emergency services were there very quickly, but the fellow students around, including some of my classmates who were in the same class as me, were just shaken up. We turned extremely pale, and we were in shock and non-responsive the rest of that class. So
I don't know. That is terrifying.
That's the second suicide attempt in my life I've witnessed.
Wow.
The other one was successful. But that's a story for a different day. I've seen a lot of death in my life for living this short amount of time. So now I'm not bragging about this. This is me just realizing the mortality that I have. But that is definitely a story for a different time.
So did I tell you guys this story? I've never seen someone like in person try to kill themselves or try to jump off a building, but I have seen the pictures of the aftermath. And there was one night, this is when I was still in the newsroom at the Enquirer, and one of our crime reporters just happened to have crime scene photos. How she got them, I do not know, of someone who jumped off Crew Tower. And they hit halfway down on one of the, because the building is staggered on one of the lower roofs, and half of her stayed up there and the other half went down.
Really?
I'm like, oh yeah, I want to see. Oh no, I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see that. Did not want to see it. Because
no,
it's different when a photojournalist is standing on the street and looking up at somebody and they take a picture of them. They're not like from top going down, and when they hit, they're not as close as a crime scene photo. So it was, I don't ever want to see that in person. I never want to see a picture of that again. And I learned my lesson.
Yeah, that's a hard job to have. Yeah. Being the people at those scenes. I can't imagine it. But so I tip my hat to anyone who does that job.
First
Reporters,
first
responders, you have hearts of gold and stomachs of iron. Because I feel sorry for that family too.
I know.
Of whomever that was.
It was a while ago. It wasn't like, I want to say the photos may have been from the 80s. It wasn't like recent when she showed them to me. But You know, and you still could. I'm not gonna say that. I mean, I don't think there are very many. I mean, the wall is pretty high up on Cruise Tower, so you
Yeah,
really
I
have
think
to
they've got it
try.
pretty.
But
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's one of those things. Yeah, newsrooms get to see. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I
Yeah.
told you about our suicide folder.
Yes.
Mhm.
I don't think you told our listeners about the suicide folder, but
no,
now you've
at
just
the-
piqued everyone's
Sorry.
curiosity.
So I used to sit and go through the Enquirer archives, and my morbid curiosity got the better of me one day, and I wondered if there was a suicide folder, because now we tend not to cover suicides because we don't want to give anyone who may be suffering an idea or to kind of repeat what they've seen in the news. So, but back in the day, they learned that the hard way, because they would, every time someone would go stand on a bridge, there would be like a rash of people jumping off bridges, and this folder, and it's not just local, it's with AP photos, it's all like, there were some from New York, and some of them are just people that are talked off the ledge, and some of them are people standing on the roof that as they're falling, and then they snapped a picture the moment they hit.
Wow.
And the aftermath. So, and they used to print that. I mean, they used to print the mob hit photos on the front
Wow.
page of the newspaper. And it just, whatever you think about criminals, I just don't think, I mean, they're still a human being. Like, and I don't know if that's just my visceral response at seeing a dead person. You know, that's how I reacted when I went to the body exhibit. I'm like, that's a person. This makes me uncomfortable. I thought I could handle it. I cannot. So even if it's a person I despise, I still don't want to see them.
Right.
Because they were living, and I don't want to see someone that has suffered in their life in that way, you know?
Well, you know, that's one way, you know, there's a lot of people that will talk about, say, the violence of society and stuff like that. And we actually, you know, in spite of all of these articles about mob hits and suicides and stuff, we actually are in a fairly sanitized time of history, because it used to be like people would go to watch public executions. That was what they went to see, instead of, you know, the next Avengers movie or whatever. You know, there's a really great podcast that Dan Carlin did about, you know, the history of, like, you know, execution and stuff like that, and how it was like an entertainment. People would tailgate at you know, public executions. And even worse, you know, you had people that, like in Europe, you would have, you know, and this is perhaps a trigger warning. I mean, they would usually, you know, put parts of criminals like outside of towns. You know, I don't want to get too visceral about that, but you know, people got used to seeing this. You'd see people's heads on pikes, you know, that was a real thing. You know, unfortunately they don't do that
it's only fairly recently too, like in the 20th century, where people have gotten really sanitized news reports of how things are. And I know I naively lived most of my life without seeing what a dead body looked like until it literally hit me one day. So, and then that changed my entire way of looking at life and mortality, and really the meaning of people interacting with one another. So,
well, and seeing it out of context, because if you walk into a hospital or a funeral home, you're prepared somewhat.
Yeah, it's different.
When I saw my dad die, it was from 4th stage malignant melanoma. Wear sunscreen and hats, people. And that took 4 years, and for that to progress to the point where he passed away via hospice. But we were with him and prepared mentally for him to leave, basically, for him to pass on. Very different than seeing somebody jump off a building when you were just listening to the most recent pop music in your headphones, and then suddenly you see this body hit an awning. Very different.
Mm.
And I'm sure it was the same with the Moselle, where you're just having your daily, actually it was evening, so you're going to be having dinner around 5 p.m. when it happened.
Mhm.
And so you're with your family or with your coworkers or your friends outside at a beer garden or enjoying an April day, and then suddenly you hear this ear-piercing explosion, and just shrieking and moaning coming from the river.
Oh.
And I mean, Cincinnati wasn't quiet back then because of all the manufacturing, but people ran for blocks to go see and what happened.
Mhm.
So,
I suppose the
well,
equivalent now would be plane crashes, like you think about Lockerbie, Scotland, where they had the plane that crashed.
yeah,
And, where you have, bits of the fuselage going into people's houses and stuff like that. Yeah, that's
Or
probably
even like the little airplanes that used to at the Blue Ash Airport before it became a park. I think there was one of those planes crashed in Blue Ash.
like a little Cessna,
Yeah.
like one of those tiny, like maybe
Mhm.
6 to 8 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One actually, I want to say within the past 10, 15 years, I think, but there was also one probably, I can't remember the date, but it's happened. Like if you live near an airport, that's possible. I don't want to
Mhm.
think about that too much because my brother-in-law is a pilot and I don't want him to.
Yeah.
Have you ever
Ever.
heard of anything around the river paranormal related to the Moselle?
No, it's all in where the Pottersfield was.
Oh, so everything concentrated by Music Hall and
Yeah. And so, yeah, there aren't any ghost stories really along the river in Cincinnati, which is amazing. Like we talked about the mermaids of the Ohio River, but I haven't run into any ghost ships like what you would see in the Great Lakes or in an ocean. But yeah, it seems the Moselle passengers haunt 12th Street, Elm Street, and that over the Rhine neighborhood.
So that's a question I have. And as a fan of the TV show Supernatural, may it rest in peace, it ended last year. They always would salt and burn the bones or whatever that person had an attachment to. So do you think that's true too for like a ghost? Like they're attached to where their bones or their body may be?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So I see where they're coming from with that, because there may be some religions, folk or non-folk, that believe if you take the remains and salt, burn, do things to them, that it will he's the spirit and they can pass on. So that idea of doing a ceremony to release a spirit from body parts, that's been done before. That's coming from an authentic place. I don't think the way that it was written into the show was particularly authentic. I know I have run into ghosts in locations where their bodies very clearly were not. You also have the idea of residual ghosts, which are just kind of imprints through time at places if it was traumatic enough. Trying to figure out the physics of that is still ongoing, but people have seen like Anne Boleyn going through to the Tower of London to Tower Hill where she was decapitated. And that's an anniversary thing. And they see her in all black and in her Tudor style dress. And she still has her head on in some cases. If you're more fantastic, she's holding her head. And if you're some stories I read as a teenager, she's using her head as a bowling ball. But
yeah, that's style.
yeah, that is style in that cap and everything. Wow. So yeah, it's, I don't think from my experience, and of course, this is just 15 years of paranormal investigations and research. No, ghosts don't have to be where their bodies are. Now, there are the idea of haunted items that people have connections to. John Zaffis immediately pops into everyone's head because of Haunted Collector. He's a wonderful guy, by the way. And that it may be a little bit more true. I know personal experience. My mom was a big fan of ceramic cats, and she bought a gray ceramic cat from a garage sale and placed it in her laundry room, and it looked like her cat Gracie, which I've talked about in the last episode. And this is not a ghost story I was going to share last week, but different one. So for whatever reason, for that week we had this porcelain or cat figurine, ceramic cat figurine, all hell broke loose in this laundry room. Like, it wasn't just like the laundry room. We had powder detergent was spread everywhere. The cats did not clearly do it. There were no paw prints. Things would go missing around the house. And we just kind of attributed it to there was some kind of spirit attached to it. And then when we passed it on to somebody else, suddenly all the supernatural phenomena stopped. So I don't know what the trigger was. Like, I don't know if somebody was with it. It triggered paranormal activity in the already haunted house. I don't know what it was, but it could be that something was attached to it. And the idea of hexes or spells being attached to items is also not new and still practiced. So I think that's where they were coming from in Supernatural.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Who got the cat? Did you ever hear if they also experienced
I
those
don't know
issues?
who got the cat. I don't even know if anyone received it. Knowing my mom, she probably threw it in the trash bin and let it go.
Wow.
So, but it was a strange week, and it's something was messing with the cats as well. They were acting very out of turn that week. So don't know what it was, but
Interesting.
they wouldn't go anywhere near that laundry room. So,
Well, I guess
which was a problem because one of their litter boxes was in it.
they're like, nope,
Aw.
we're not going to use it. It's bad.
Yeah,
Yes.
so they
There's
just
bad
wouldn't
juju
do.
in there.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
bad juju.
I
So-
mean that could be an interesting topic of a show, even haunted objects and
Yeah.
what causes something to attach to something else and that kind of thing. And we might even get into it next week. We have some ghost hunters on.
Yeah, we can ask the ladies about that next week.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's
just
really
about their
interesting.
thoughts on haunted objects. And
Yeah, I
could
mean,
you
it's-
imagine those ossuary churches, the amount of spirits that would be attached and haunting those locations with like the cathedrals made out of bone and all that?
yeah, I mean,
They would be hot bopping places for the afterlife.
yeah,
Well, it's just where they go to meet each other
it's like a
and
convention.
hang out in the afterlife, maybe.
Maybe.
Well,
I thought it was
mean,
Disney's Haunted Mansion. Ah,
it's something interesting to talk about because and then what makes a spirit cling to these things or what makes them move on. I mean, like we've talked about, it seems like sometimes trauma will keep people there.
trauma will from very recent experience with a family member with Alzheimer's, it's deep embedded memories and sentimentality, I think, doesn't get given enough playtime or airtime with the idea of being stuck on something. Like, sentimental value to people, I think it's underrated and it's a main driver. So in this case, my family member will ask me about sentimental items and I have to make a checklist and say, these are all okay, take photos to reassure them that all these items are okay. And I know I've run into people or ghosts, spirits that have had mental I don't want to say mental problems because that shortens it so much.
Well, maybe it could be the equivalent of like when you had a scratched record and it keeps repeating that scratch. Like
it could be
records are before your
maybe
time.
in that case, but people are sentimental outside of Alzheimer's and dementia. So I think maybe that was the case with the porcelain cat, that whomever owned it beforehand, because I could
Viewed
totally
it.
see my mom buying it from a estate sale, was very attached to it. Like they played with it as a kid, or it had a lot of like memory to it, and so they just attached and palled around with it. So
They
that I
viewed
think
it
is the
with.
thing. Yeah, they imbued it with their own, like they could have even cast a spell on it without even knowing.
Well, I mean, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of, and you talk about memory loss and stuff. I think there's a lot of oversimplification in what happens, like things with Alzheimer's and dementia
Oh
and
yeah.
that sort of thing. Because it's not like it's a caricature of like no short-term memory. There's a lot of other things at play. And I think there's other types of thought that they don't talk about as much, such as, my father had a lot of thought patterns that would become obsessive. So it's almost like a loop. It's a
Oh yeah.
error message. And so your brain can't shake this thought. And
Yeah, like
so they get
OCD.
obsessed. Yeah. So they get obsessed by one thing. And perhaps it's because the breakage of the apparatus that hosts, thought, maybe your short-term memories are gone, but also it obsesses about certain things. And like you said, maybe certain objects or certain people or certain things.
And mental illness layered on top of already cognitive illness like that. Like I have ADHD. If depression or anxiety gets layered on top of that, then the brain even reacts in a different way that isn't always, oh, what's the word? Not projected, but predictable. There we go. There's the P word that I was looking for. So, and I think a lot, just like with crime history, where we kind of forget about the victims or we sensationalize it and forget they're human, definitely the same thing happens to ghost stories and the victims in those ghost stories. We forget that they were people. Like all the victims of the Moselle, when I was doing research into it, they were people in forums who are descendants of the survivors of the Moselle, talking about the stories that their families passed on. Which reminds me, we even got a commenter from somebody from Edith Klump's family on talking about how she is kind of perceived in their family, and kind of, what is it, they said, the family gossip, like I don't
Yeah, it's
have
such
the
an interesting.
comment.
If you listen to that
Yeah.
episode again, please read the comment in that episode, which was episode 15, or there's episode 15.
Yeah, and I'm
We'll
sorry
put
we
it in the
haven't
show
replied
notes.
to you yet, but we have seen your message. But yeah, it's these were people. They have family. A lot of them are still alive, and it isn't all just folklore. Because it, and this is where when people ask me on all the different press tours that I did, oh my goodness, I just made my self sound so gigantic. Um, like gigantic head cat. Um, one of the people are like, are ghosts real? And I'm like, well, in which sense? Because these were people, they have family members, and to those family members, these people are very real. So I guess ghosts are real in this sense. If you're looking at it as a purely entertainment sense, then like if you're in supernatural, oh no, that's all fiction. That's entertainment. But when we're talking about ghost stories about people like Amy of Lick Road, which is an actual murder victim, yeah, she was very real. And Linda Dyer. So yeah, that's always a really tricky question to answer to people that are interviewing me, going, are ghosts real? Yes.
Well,
Yes, they are real in people's memory.
it seems like there's a lot of um understanding that could be had about, I mean, also what are we perceiving in the world? I mean, we see so little that
Yeah.
we can't. And anything that you look at that talks about expanded consciousness, either like when you talk about people that work in hospices, often the people right before they die start talking to family members to people that use psychedelics like DMT or whatever. And the second that they kind of take off, there's beings around them saying, "Oh, we're so glad you're here."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here
Yeah.
comes one sulking cat.
Oh,
guy.
it's Conan.
He's like, they've been abusing me.
Oh.
No,
Yes,
they
yes.
haven't been abusing him. They've been giving
No.
him meds. Our
Yes,
friendly
but
listeners.
in his perception, having to take medicine is not what he wants to do.
Yeah. And there's Miffy. So if you're
Yeah.
listening to us over on iTunes, this is not great content. The cat break after the soapbox we just got on.
Mhm.
Yeah,
There is
you can
Miffy
see
in the
cats behind me
background.
all the time. Yes.
And Conan, the
Yes.
cute kitten. I'm waiting for
And-
Bob, who
He'll be
reminds
there
me of
eventually.
my old cat. So
Oh.
Do most hospice centers now have cats
You
that
know,
comfort the dying patients?
I think some of them will bring in comfort animals. I don't think that a lot of
Mhm.
times the staff wants to handle for a variety of reasons. I think that those people tend not to be paid enough as it is, and having to take care of
True.
their tenants as well as comfort animals. But there are groups that come in and bring in dogs. Even I think my dad, when he was in the nursing home, they brought in a comfort horse.
Oh
you know,
wow.
and they
Wow.
loved it.
Aw.
I think it's hard to have animals in those places because there's a lot of people are allergic, particularly to
Mhm.
cats, but dogs and whatever. Didn't you say that your dog was a trained service dog?
Yeah, so Wheatley is a trained therapy dog, and
Mhm.
like in Cincinnati, it used to be called Delta Dogs. I believe they've changed their name since then, but that was the service dog training group. And you, nursing homes, assisted living centers, I know Cincinnati Children's Hospital would contact them and say, "Hey, we have a patient who would like a dog. Please come." And we would go. I never got to that point because Wheatley developed cancer, and which made him ineligible to do any of this right as he finished all of his training.
Aw.
Aw.
Timing. Oh well, we're trying. Once the pandemic ends, we can take Chewy to these type of trainings, and he's big and fluffy and very friendly, so he'll probably do really well as a successor to Wheatley. But our dogs are great because they don't shed, they have hair, and they're very tactile. So kids love petting them because they're big and floofy, like big cotton balls with tongues.
I think it's great people that have those service animals because it seems like there is one thing we didn't really I guess maybe we touched on it last week is just how much our animal companions mean to us. And
Hmm. Yeah.
although I can't see your faces right now because there is a cat in front of my screen, so she heard about
Cute.
this and she's like, speaking of that, I'm gonna be
Is it Miffy?
yes
Aw. Oh,
No,
there's her tail.
yeah. So we're not doing good content right now, but I've got an assistant here. But I think that and I think there is a lot to their spirits too. Like they might even be part of the spirit group they talk about that you're with.
Oh yes, yes. That's why I brought it up last week. Is the soul groups. It isn't just humans; it could be animals that could be part of your soul group as well. Which is why some psychics may believe that you have particular animals that you get along with better than others because you may be part of a soul group who gets along with snakes or something like that, or dogs, or all animals type of thing.
Yeah, it's really
So,
interesting.
shall we move to the USS Sachem?
Oh yes, please.
Sure.
Yes. Oh, we almost forgot. We had the actual ghost ship of the title of tonight's show. All right. So this one should be good for all audiences to listen to. So this is the tale of the USS Sachem, roughly 25 miles downstream of Cincinnati in a tiny tributary in Kentucky is a ghost ship. And this interesting ghost ship has had many titles. It has lived through so many things, and it is a shame that it's just sitting there rusting away and only kayakers can really access it. This is the story of the USS Sachem. So, originally launched in Wilmington, Delaware on April 12th, 19 1902, the Sachem, as we're calling her for most of this particular part, was a luxury pleasure yacht for a railroad mogul. At 186 feet, her original title was the Celt, and she was an opulent steam-powered boat who ferried the rich during their days of play. And this would be through 1902 through 1914. There was a change of ownership where she got the name Sachem, and this is right before World War I. During World War I, the Sachem was commandeered by the U.S. Navy, renamed the USS Sachem, or also known as SP-192, and she went into combat actually as a searching vessel for German U-boats and submarines threatening the U.S. and British supply lines. So this was very much an East Coast yacht/ship, and most of her service years were actually around New York, Connecticut, and along that East Coast shoreline. Interesting enough, Thomas Edison used the USS Sachem as a wartime lab for 10 weeks, working for U.S. forces in 1916. He was given a crew to man the ship, while his son Theodore and his wife Mina also joined him on the boat for those 10 weeks. Edison's main focus during this time was creating camouflage for protecting merchant vessels in the ocean, as well as secret experiments along the coasts of New York, Sag Harbor, Florida, and the Caribbean. He worked on improving the searchlights so that you can see periscopes from the enemy submarines, smoke screens for evasion, and a collision mat, as it was called in his notes, to help torpedo ships return afloat, among other experiments for a maritime invention. However, his time came to an end in 1918 with the Navy when Edison lost funding and departed. It said that he kind of had a tumultuous relationship with the U.S. Navy. And after the war, this Sachem was returned to her civilian owners. Through the 1920s and 1930s, she was turned into a fishing vessel and basically worked off the coast of New York State. She was pulled into service for the Second World War, where she was overhauled and given sonar, along with the new name, the USS Fenakite, which I really like that name. I think it's kind of fun to say. And she seems to have spent a majority of World War II looking for Japanese submarines, like she did in World War I. She was a very speedy steamboat and in the Pacific Ocean. Once the war ended, she received an American Campaign Medal, and along with 2 Victory Medals for her service from the Navy. Her name was changed back to the Sachem, and she was returned to her civilian owners once again. Her post-life war, there was the ADD and dyslexia just blah. Her post-war life was in the service of a cruise line in New York City, where she received the name the Sightseer and later the Circle Line 5, which is still visible on her hull today, should you find her in that tributary in Kentucky. In 1986, she was purchased by a private owner, Robert Miller, and was used as a backdrop of one of Madonna's songs, Papa Don't Preach. Now, this is a blink and you miss it kind of cameo. Oh, sorry. What is it, Christina? Oh,
sorry. Phenakite is because that is an interesting name, and it's kind of like a quartz crystal. So I looked it up, and it says that it's like long been associated with quartz, apatite, and topaz.
Oh, okay.
It's long been known from the emerald and chrysoberyl mine on the Takavaya stream near in Russia.
Huh. And now you know what a phenakite is. It's still a cool name, though. So anyway, as I was saying, with the Sachems, oh man, she's in the background for less than a second. I think I took a photo of it. It's around the 1 minute, 36-second mark. But yeah, her hull's in the background when she's chilling with her boyfriend in that music video. And it was right after that music video, she was actually moved to the tributary in Kentucky. And she's permanently moored there and is still there to this day. The Sachem is easiest to view if you use a kayak. If you go there, however, remember it is actually on private property and the boat itself is private property. So please don't go in it. Maybe just take photos from afar if you can do that. To go onto the property itself, if you wanted to walk, you would also be going onto private property, and we don't condone that. So please don't do that. There's actually a group trying to save the Sachem right now, the Sachem Project, and they're found at uss-sachem.org. And they're currently raising funds to restore her. And I think, this is just my editorializing here, I think it would be really neat to restore her and permanently moor her in Newport. Because where I grew up, we had the USS Silversides, which was a Navy submarine. It's in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and you can actually tour it and do overnight stuff. Like when I was a Girl Scout, we did a lot of overnight tours up there. Yes, the USS Silversides is haunted. Yes, I have a ghost story associated with it, but I think it'd be really cool if we could do that to this boat as well. So that's just my 2 cents. But that is the story of the USS Sachem.
Yay!
Yeah, much more pleasant tone. I find it amazing that she was Thomas Edison's floating lab.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm like, how is this boat just sitting in a tributary rusting away with a history like that? There's so much. You got everything from like wartime history. You can find a lot of information about her from Navy websites, Navy history websites. And I actually do have some World War I photos of her and Thomas Edison with his crew that I found that I need to send over to Christina.
So
and
go on. Sorry, finish your.
No, I just have the less than second cameo. I managed to watch the music video, freeze it, and get the photo of her behind Madonna.
Oh, that's awesome! I want to see that.
So why was the Sachem considered a ghost ship?
So she's considered a ghost ship because she's abandoned along the Ohio River. Okay. Yeah, like a ghost town. She's not haunted. I'm sorry everyone who got excited with that, but she's just not even a phantom ship. You can Google her coordinates and it's on Atlas Obscura, on Road Trippers, and she's even a pinned area on Google Maps.
Oh wow.
But like I said, she is private property, but a very popular photo destination for kayakers around the Ohio River.
Mm-hmm.
She is kind of dangerous to get to, though. Apparently, you have to kayak up the Ohio River from a dock just downriver of her, and you have to deal with the traffic of the Ohio River. And the Ohio River is still massively used by barges, so you have to be very careful when you go find her.
Mm-hmm. Well, one day we'll be able to, well, maybe not that one because it's private property, but see more of these things and get pictures and that kind of thing. But that's cool.
This is, unfortunately, is one of those locations I haven't been able to visit because I can't kayak.
Well, it's never too late to learn.
It's never too late to learn, but I learned about her because I have friends who do kayak as a hobby, and they're like, "Hey, Kat!" This was several years ago. Like, "Hey, Kat, did you know we found a ghost ship? It's in Kentucky. Do you want to hear about it? It's really creepy." And then they're like, "It says it's the Circle Line 5," and I'm like, "That sounds like a convenience store title. That doesn't sound like a ship." But then that's all they knew was that it was creepy. And there's tons of photos that other people have taken.
I have to, and talking about, Edison, he was pretty unethical, and he could be on some of those Dark Matters episodes from the Science Channel because he did some pretty creepy things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did.
When experimenting electricity comes to mind. He liked to publicly electrocute things.
Yeah.
just to see what would happen.
I'm not sure why he did it, but it was pretty cruel.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was just trying to show what the power of electricity did, or
Yeah, I think that's what it was. What did he do? I actually don't know.
He actually electrocuted animals publicly, showing what current did. And I know he at least did an elephant.
Oh,
He was
no.
There was,
Poor thing.
people seem not to worry about things like ethics sometimes back in the day.
Well,
if
when the
this is
sake of science.
Well, people, it's funny because people always, that I think when you talk about who writes history, and this could be a whole separate discussion, but I know we need to get to hometown haunts. But when you record history, a lot of people get upset when, like, say, a beloved character, I don't want to say character, a beloved historical figure like Edison or whatever, when it actually is revealed that they did some pretty awful things, people get all emotional and say, how could you speak about this person? They did so many X, Y, and Z good things. How can you dare say that they did bad things too? And I think that that's what's coming to a head in a lot of history, that a lot of things, a lot of people that were kind of revered, their hit pasts were also sanitized, so some of the stuff that they did may not have been so nice or so good.
Well, everybody does bad things. It's just the degree of bad, right?
I guess, but how people look at stuff kind of changes too.
Too. Yeah.
The main person I think of that is Thomas Jefferson.
True.
In American educational system, at least before in Indiana, he's kind of praised as this great president, and then as you learn more about the history about how he made his money and the slaves that he abused, and also the anthropological works that he destroyed out of just pure curiosity, and then never bothered really documenting much. There's a lot of mounds, just like Serpent Mound, that he destroyed that was on his property. This is me smiling out of anger. This is me mad. This is me going, why? But he did some really disastrous things, and as you get older and read about what he's done and what he destroyed, I'm sitting there, not just objects but also people's lives, and I'm just like, wow, why do we celebrate this man? And people are complex, and that's it, because his background was sanitized for the American education system.
I think that's always the complicated thing is I think people are, I mean, you hope that people are getting more advanced, and that's why you don't see heads on pikes anymore and stuff like that. But we have a long way to go, and seeing the stuff that he did, I think we shouldn't sanitize it. I think people should know,
Well, yeah, how else are we going to learn from our past?
Well, yeah, exactly. And, the desecration of other cultures, I mean, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. That happened a lot with Rome, where they just kind of, would destroy people's cultural history and just say, well, they were barbarians. They didn't have anything special to offer, when they destroyed many good cultures and interesting cultures. I mean, it would be wonderful to know. And and there's a history of humans destroying other cultures.
The Spaniards taking out the Mayans and the Aztecs. And the Olmecs, and a lot of people of South and Central America.
For example, if anyone's been to Albuquerque and you look at the Native American cultural centers there, they basically built Catholic churches over their kivas and forced them to convert, and they're still mad, and they should be mad. That was not.
They have every right to be furious.
And so people, again say, well, why can't we go back to simpler times when people didn't think like this? And it's like, that's the wrong way to look at it. You need to realize and reckon with, that there have been bad things, and we can't close our eyes to it, or the bad things happen again.
Yeah, it was simpler times for you, but it was definitely not simpler times for everyone else who was the majority. And
well, and those things still happened then. There were still mental illness and murderers. We just didn't know, or it was we were able to keep better secrets. Who knows?
That's true. That's true.
It's just like the axe murders of the 19 teens, where you just had different police departments that you had families like the Vilska axe murder that actually was so bad that took the Titanic off the front page. And that may have been actually part of a different series of axe murders perpetuated by the same guy or similar people. For that, I say go listen to American Hauntings by Troy Taylor. That's a wonderful podcast. Go listen to it. Hi, Troy.
All right. Well, this has been an interesting discussion. Are we ready for the namesake of this podcast, Hometown
Yes,
Haunts?
the hometown haunts. Do you want to read Anonymous,
Yes, I can
Christina?
read Anonymous.
And then I got my friend Katie's.
All right. Yeah, this is from Anonymous. And I thought this was a really interesting story. So a few things have happened in my mom's house, actually, from a vacuum turning on in the basement that wasn't plugged in to some weird stuff happening to my sisters after they played with a spirit board. When I was really little, I used to get scared of the closet in my mom's room. She and my sisters said I used to complain about there being a fat lady in the closet. This wasn't a walk-in, but kind of a small broom closet, even though it was kind of a master bedroom in the master bedroom. The house was pretty old. We found a foundation stone in the basement that placed it in the late 1700s. I was terrified of the fat lady in the closet, and of course my older sisters loved shoving me in there with the lights off from time to time. Well, flash forward to my late teens, early 20s. I don't remember why, but for some reason I was doing research on the town. Our house was pretty close to the downtown area, and I remember getting an old pack of postcards that showed what the area was like within the first 5 miles of the house. There was the train that went to Chicago, some trolleys that crisscrossed the downtown area, a couple of shops along the river, and there was a watch factory that was turned into a munitions factory for World War II for a bit, and a lot of butchers and the like. It turns out that some of the houses and the inns were around our neighborhood. The house across from us and on the corner was an old carriage house. It was thought that some of the homes across and around the area were inns and tap houses, or even barracks for the rail company workers. I don't think we ever found out for sure what the house used to be. Likely our home was built over an existing home, but the foundation was kept intact. But I do remember coming across information, maybe via microfiche, that the buildings across from the carriage house, ours and the neighbor's house, had not only burned down at some point, but there had been a death there, a middle-aged woman who had been found hanging in one of the rooms. It was the fat lady I used to see in the closet as the kid. I remember it really freaked me out in a way I hadn't felt since I was a kid. I just think it grew out over time and I forgot about it. I didn't even remember until I shared this info with my mom.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, go on,
No,
Jen.
I was just gonna say, I'm kind of happy that they found an answer.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I wonder how many of those places were brothels.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think about
Yeah.
that. And the
Yeah,
house probably
it
was built over something else.
Oh yeah, most likely. There's so many houses that's the case. I mean, if the foundation was good, it helped cost save to be able to build a house on top of old foundation. As I smack myself on the table.
One thing that's interesting is finding these postcards that she mentioned. Is that ever like an outreach from that spirit? That seems very coincidental that you would find a photo of somebody that you used to see in your closet all the time. Could that
It
have
could.
been sort of
I don't know.
more than a
Did she mention
coincidence?
how she found them? She just mentioned that she found them.
She said their house was close to a downtown area and they found an old pass. She doesn't say if
She
I'll have to ask
remembers
her.
getting an old pack of postcards. It depends on like the situation in which she found them. Was she just happenstance passing by? Did they show up on a counter? Like questions about that. I've heard stories about, especially from the Crump Theater in Columbus, Indiana. Their documents for their boiler showed up in the middle of the stage after the manager had been looking for them for a few days because they needed to replace the boiler. So objects apporting like that, just appearing like that, is quite common and classic ghost behavior. But I don't know if the postcards did that.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting. I'll have to ask for a little bit of clarification on that because that was very interesting.
Yeah. So our next haunted hometown haunt story is shared from Katie from Indiana. And she notes that this happened in Gettysburg Battlefield, circa 2003 to 2007. And Katie wrote, "We had gone there with my dad, my stepmother, my sister, and me. We had spent basically an entire week at the battlefields and gone just about everywhere. My dad wanted to check out Devil's Den area where there was fighting. Devil's Den is really hilly and rocky area with giant boulders and crags. After the battle, the fallen soldiers were just tossed, some of them into the crevices between the boulders. My stepmother was the kind of person who would walk 50 miles a day, and if she could, she was all for walking around the battlefield. My dad wanted to read the different plaques and had set up that were set up at different spots. Me being a teenager, I was at the time refused to go walking around in the sun and staring at nothing. So I told my dad I'd stay near the beginning of the trail and just hang out on a boulder. I picked a nice big one just to people watch. So I'm sitting there minding my own business when I hear this deep, scruffy voice behind me say, "Lady, did you get left behind?" I turn around to explain that I was just waiting for my family. Nope, nobody there. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm about 6 feet up on this darn boulder. There can't be anyone right behind me talking. There was nobody there. Nobody is close by. My family was all the way across the field. Nobody probably within 100 yards of me at this point. And I can still hear the gruff, gravelly voice. Of course, everyone thought I was crazy, but that's one of my favorite personal experiences, not at an active investigation. Thank you, Katie. That's a wonderful story.
That's cool.
You
That
got
is
Jen
cool.
all excited.
I would probably jump off the boulder and break a leg.
Oh, don't do that. No.
If I heard that, that would have scared the ever living life out of me.
Yeah.
Or maybe it sounded like a soldier just wanted to mess with her.
Yeah, it's so I've been to Devil's Den. I have a ghost story to share from there. There's a lot from my times at Gettysburg. So for those who don't know, and maybe I can provide some photos for the YouTube channel and post them on our website as well. We now have a website, by the way. Devil's Den is a craggy rock formation that those boulders are easily 1 story high. So if you jumped off of them, you would be breaking more than just your legs.
Okay.
And and there was also, I believe it was a Union sharpshooter that was based not too far away from that, targeting Confederate troops in the triangular field, which is across 200, 300 yards away. And so I'm there at Gettysburg. Now, mind you, at the time when I was there, I was not well versed in Gettysburg military history. Military history is something I'm personally very poor at. I don't know that very well. And but I'm with some of my friends who are reenactors for the Union Army. And they're big historians and they're telling me everything, but I'm just walking around Devil's Den and I look down and staring up from in the cracks, there is a Union soldier who is maybe 17. His eyes have milk glazed over because he's been dead long enough, but they were blue eyes and he had blonde hair and his hat had fallen off of his head but was laying on another soldier that he had been put on top of. So I had this dead body looking up at me from one of these cracks. Wow. And I just remember going, "Oh," and I turned to my friend Pat, who is a historian, and I go, "Were there dead bodies here at some point?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, Kat, this is where they put all the dead bodies after one of the fights on this day, blah, blah, blah." And he goes off to explain it. I'm like, and I look through and there was no one there. It's been the Park Service keeps it really clean. There's no litter or anything in these boulders. So it was a really weird image to just look down and see this dead body staring back up at you, who was a few hours dead, if I know my autopsies right, at corpse time. But yeah, that was really startling. So Katie sent me this story and I was just like, oh yeah, like that. There's a lot of activity around Devil's Den, paranormal activity. And Yeah.
So
And then also Katie's a really good investigator as well.
in that moment, when you see that, when you're not expecting it, what do you just kind of freeze, or do you like, how do you make sense of that?
So initially I would have panicked, but by this point I was older and more trained. So
Okay.
trying to train that flight instinct out, and instead of fighting, train it to be inquisitive. So I just remember stopping and then freezing for my safety, because if I had actually tried to run away, I would have fallen off and hurt myself. So I remember just freezing and just going, there's a body there. And I remember actually getting closer to look at it, because I'm like, there's a body here and I can see his big blue eyes staring at me as they're slowly getting milky as the life drains out of them.
Aw.
And then somebody, of course, like I go and say to Pat, and I look away. Then when I look back, it's gone. And then some teenagers ran through the tunnel passage that there is there. So then suddenly there was
Wow.
living people. And I was just like, oh. And then another vision I had, these same teenagers were running over piles of corpses. And as they were hitting the bodies, you could see the arms of the corpses or the legs of the corpses kind of pop up from the impact of these kids running. It was very surreal. And I was just like, what is happening?
How long have you been
Mhm.
sensitive in this way?
Oh, goodness. Oh, easily since I was 3. I remember seeing things around bedroom windows when I lived in Detroit. And then
You sure it
definitely
wasn't creepy creepers looking in at you?
well, I was on the second story.
No.
So I always keep my windows closed, like the blinds and everything, because that was a weird story. But I was really young, so I'm not completely certain if that was real. I'll give you that. But definitely I've been visited and I've had experiences since I was in elementary school. And that prompted me, I would share my stories with my friends on the play yard, and they were like, oh, that's really cool, let me share stories that happened at our families. And then we started swapping ghost stories. So I think that's actually how I got interested in haunted history to begin with. So you're looking at like 8 years old, easy.
Aw.
And I'm dyslexic, and keeping my attention on reading anything just to learn language skills, I discovered that I really liked haunted history books. So the first book I ever got was Haunted Ohio, and it is by Chris Woodyard. And I bought it in a bookstore in Ashtabula, Ohio, when we were visiting. And yeah, that got me. I was so interested in all the different stories that I kept reading. And then it was actually the first book in my entire life I had finished that was actual,
That's
just all
awesome.
written prose, not like a comic book or any type of thing like that. So while my friends all read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I was reading about haunted Ohio history.
Nice.
I confess I would have been reading Hitchhiker's Guide. I only read things that had dragons in them or witches or, stuff like that as a kid.
That came later when I got more proficient in reading, but what got me reading was really this history. So that's why I'm really big into haunted history, telling the true story behind these stories.
But I'm
And
I'm
also,
fascinated by these experiences though, because that's not something
yeah.
everybody has. I mean, I don't see people that aren't there. And
Yeah.
I wish I did, but I don't. I never have.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun telling these stories. I'm a decent storyteller. But also these are all personal experiences and you haven't had them. So I do my best to describe what I'm seeing. But yeah, it's one reason why I'm into the paranormal, like as a paranormal investigator, is these are encounters that I've had, but these are personal. So I don't know if I can ever show like a scientist, like a physicist or a psychologist what's happening. And trying to prove that is very difficult. So in my case, I'm just like, okay, it's not going to be provable in a lab. It's not going to be easily provable in the field like what an anthropologist would do. So I'll just participant observe everything, write down what I see, and then just in case anybody else finds anything that can link it, these stories are archived.
So me being the photo person that I am, do you think if you wore like a body cam, you would be able to catch something?
Probably
or do
not.
they just don't show up on film or
They
digital
could.
film?
So that's an entire science and art that I'm not really great with, photography and film. So I'm not the person to ask about that. In a more metaphysical sense, it's my third eye that's able to catch these things.
Right.
And not all of them are like that. Like I've had deathbed apparitions of friends of mine that I know we're going to get a little off topic and we're getting a little long here, but I'll share this story. I'm not sure if I have before on here. So, my senior year of high school, I had a friend drown in Lake Michigan and another friend kill himself in the same day. And that was very hard because my friend who had drowned was a elementary school friend and I had known him for easily over 10 years. And since he was also in music activities as I was after school, I would take him home a lot. So it was rather rocking to discover that he had died. He died in a very valiant way. He went to go save a girl he had a crush on because she got caught by the undertow. He rescued her, but couldn't rescue himself, and he was found a mile north of where he went in about 3 days later. And that was very hard. And so I knew him. At that time, I had already kind of built my spiritual beliefs of there is an afterlife. Seeing the dead is something common for me. So I probably will encounter him at some point. But a lot of people from different backgrounds don't necessarily have those same beliefs or experiences, and they took it very, very hard. And that same time, like I said, I was in a band, and our friend, not only was I in the school band, but I was also in a bunch of friends that we had guitars and we would rock out sometimes. We were terrible, absolutely terrible. But he would come in from time to time and assist our bass player. And she was very close to both my friend who had passed away drowning and him, our bass player friend, who also played bass and guitar for the jazz band and the pep band. So they both died the same weekend. It was very, very hard. They could not have lived more different lives. So if you can imagine my friend who passed away in Lake Michigan, he was the Gap wearing kind, khaki pants. He had very straight-laced, mid-aughts looking guy with the plaid shirts that were always left open and you would have like a solid shirt underneath. That was him. And then our friend that was in the rock band wore rave wear. So he had the gigantic pants, the black pants with the many belts and the many chains. And he usually wore a tank top with fishnet over it and spiked up his hair and had many, 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 many ear piercings. So very different lives, very different interests. So senior year of high school, I'm sitting down, it's 10 p.m. I'm working on my Japanese homework for the next day. And I look up and standing at the end of my bed is both of my friends. And they're wearing exactly what I just described to you, but in white, in shades of khaki, which was hilarious. I remember my friend who played bass, I'm seeing him wear the tank top and the gigantic cargo pants, but they're all white. And then he has like this slightly cream colored fishnet. And I'm like, that is the least punk thing I have ever freaking seen. Like, it looked like wedding attire, like punk rave wedding attire. And then he had all of his piercings in. So I'm staring there and trying not to laugh because I'm just seeing my two friends who have deceased And they just turn to me and they say, "Tell Erica we're okay." And I'm like, what the bloody fuck does that mean? I don't know. And I'm like, okay, I'll tell Erica. And at the time, I did not know Erica very well. She was in my friend's circle, but we orbited in different sides of it. And we shared an Earth space science class, but we weren't close. And I'm like, okay, I'll tell her that. And they're like, thank you. And then they just disappeared. And I was like, okay, well, this is a new experience. By this time, I've had multiple experiences with unexplainable things, so just took this in stride. So the next day, I go to class. Earth Space Science was the first class I had that day. And I go up to Erica and I go, this is going to sound really weird, but our mutual friends came up to me and said, tell Erica we're doing okay. And she just broke down crying and she hugged me. And it was exactly what she needed to hear because she was very worried about them because of her religious background. And I was like, no, they're fine. I explained how they were dressed and that they looked like they were in a white light and they looked like they had passed on without any issue. They got through the pearly gates just fine. And we're just like, we're concerned about Erica. Let her know about this and moved on. And it gave her a lot of relief. And that's how we became good friends. And Erica and I still talk to each other. Actually, I was talking to her before the show.
Maybe she'll listen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She'll probably listen and go, really, you shared that story, Kat. But yeah.
That's a very sweet and touching story.
Yeah. And
kind of a comforting high school story for so many people who lost high school.
It is. Friends. It is. And so, yeah, I like the story. It's seared into my brain. And yeah, it's very comforting. This is what a lot of ghost stories really are. They're comforting stories. They're not scary, not Hollywoodized like that. And because we're all human. Personally, just I believe that your family members can come see you again without issue. Similar coattailing off of that, one Thanksgiving, my dad showed up at the Thanksgiving Day table dressed just like I described my other friends. He was wearing shades of white and cream, but here's the great thing. He looked like he was 40 years younger. And he was wearing the great 1990s workman attire, like business salesman attire. So he had this stupid polo shirt with the stupid collar and the pocket. And then he had pleated khaki pants that were too big for him. And one of those stupid little woven belts. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, Dad, like if you're going to show up, dress better. Stood up. He was behind my mom, and it was basically just. And the interesting thing with that encounter was the candle that we had lit on the table. Now, mind you, we're not summoning anyone. We're eating turkey dinner. Like, there's nothing occult happening. This is the most American apple pie thing that could be happening. And the candle that was burning in the centerpieces, they had been the normal burning like 1 inch flame. They suddenly went up to 3 inches. Whoa. When my dad showed up. And my mother-in-law noticed this and she's just like, Kat, because she's a big believer in in the paranormal and the supernatural. She's a huge supernatural fan.
I like her.
Just like you, Jen. And she was she's like, Kat, do you see this? And I'm like, yeah, Dad's here. And she was like, ooh, and she was really impressed. Like, she's like, why did he come by? And I'm like, it's Thanksgiving. Family's together. He's going to pop in during that time. So that's why I think Christmas ghost stories were really popular in the previous centuries because family was together. This is when your loved ones are going to visit you.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, on that note, we probably should wrap it up.
Yeah, we've been on for a while.
Yeah, we're gonna start just having 2-hour episodes, but this has been really
Oh, no.
interesting, and there's a lot of stuff we could talk for hours every time we do
Mhm.
this, but
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
you know, we don't want to. We're trying to make it hour and a half, but this is gonna be longer than that.
Can you imagine once we can all get together and do these live in a room?
Yeah,
That'll
that'll
be
be
fun.
great. Yeah.
That'll
Yeah,
be fun.
Kat, I've never seen you in person.
Nope.
Nope.
Yes. Yeah, for our listeners, Jen and I have never met in person.
Mm-mm.
So,
we definitely
yeah,
have to do a live show one day like that.
I'm extremely underwhelming.
Well, you know,
No, you're not. You're extremely fascinating.
yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by, you know, your ability to see, because I do think, you know, that there are some, you know, things that rotate each other and kind of
Hmm.
protect each other and stuff. And even if you can't see it, it's there. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that there's just something that obscures, possibly by necessity.
Hmm.
There's the reason
Yeah.
things are obscured.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I
see,
don't go out looking for it either, by the way. Like when ghosts come up to me, I'm just like, oh, hey. It's just like another person just walks into the room. So,
See, I like hearing your stories
mhm.
because I believe you and I believe those stories.
Oh, thank you.
But I don't ever want to experience that myself.
That's
It's
fine.
more fun to have that little removed. I can still pretend it's not real.
And this is why, my friends, everyone puts me in the front during haunted house attractions. They're just like, nothing's going to bother Kat. She experiences this on a daily basis. But yeah, that's fine. And I guarantee you, with an attitude like that, Jen, they're never coming to you.
Great.
Yeah,
I am
they're
always
never.
the first person in haunted houses too. That I don't mind. I don't like being in the back. I don't want
I
anybody
know
coming
why
up
they like
behind
putting
me.
you in the front. You're so animated.
Yeah,
Oh, I went, one friend of mine, we went to Halloween Haunt, and those are not scary, but she was scared and was fine. And she was right behind me, and somebody jumped out at her and she just grabbed my tits. I'm sorry, my boobs. And I had just met this girl that night. And I'm like, okay, this is how it's going. It's fine. I don't feel molested, but try not to do that again. She's like, oh, sorry. I'm like, well, you know, they're big, they're there. You got to have something to grab onto.
Are you also short like I am?
No, I'm 5'7",
Oh,
5'8". I'm a little round in the middle, but I've got big boobs, which are always there. And now that I'm older, they're a pain in the butt because they're saggy. And I want to cut them off because they annoy me. But I don't want to have elective surgery because, you know.
right.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a
So
pain.
now I'm in the search for the perfect bra to wear while I go out.
Mhm.
Just, you know, so they don't. I mean, I've always had that problem. They bounce. I'm sorry.
So you'd
You
be
can cut
super
all of it.
underwhelmed. No, it's
can
I'm
cut all that.
5'2", so I'm like, and man, that'll be fun when we meet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tiny.
I'm old, I'm tall, and I'm fat and flabby. Because I do nothing but sit on my ass.
That's everyone now.
yeah. I was saying
All
I
we
need
can
to.
do.
I wish I could get out and walk more. I feel like I need to do something, but now of course it's sleeting out. You're not going to be able to go out.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, I can hardly wait.
I
to go
have
out
3
and do
dogs, and I have to summon the willpower to go
Yeah.
walk them. I'm just like,
I
oh,
have a
no.
treadmill in the basement that sits there and collects dust.
It's a good place for
Oh.
the cat to sit.
Yeah, she doesn't. It's too hard for her. She prefers the pillows and to take up my entire bed.
Well,
because
that's
it's
most
hers.
comfortable, of course,
Mhm.
everything's hers.
Yes.
But anyway, well, let's until next week.
Yeah, until next week. We got the ladies. We got some ghost hunter ladies on.
Yes, next week's a really exciting episode.
Yeah,
So,
we'll be talking more shop like this, get more ghost stories, which will be wonderful. And also, if you have your own ghost story that you would like us to read on air, you can email them over to us at cincycuriosities@gmail.com. And one of us beautiful ladies, beautiful round big boobed ladies, will read it on air. So I'm Kat Cloco. We have Jan Kohler and Christina Wald, and sometimes Conan the cat in the background. Have a great night and stay spooky, everyone.
Bye.
yay.